Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Zero Trust Journey. I'm one of your hosts, Steve Turner, and I'm joined by my co-host, Zach Pugh. And today's episode, we have the honor of having Dr. Zero Trust, or Chase Cunningham, industry luminary and bringer of truth around Zero Trust. Welcome to the podcast, Chase.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. When y'all started this, I was like, that's pretty slick. I wonder if I'll get called to jump in. So I appreciate the outreach.
Yeah, of course you'll get called, Chase. Of course.
And a lot smarter, better looking people. So I'm always okay with you in the list.
Yeah, Chase, for our audience, and I'd be shocked if there's somebody who doesn't know you in this space at this point, but can you give them a little intro of who you are, your background? Tell our audience, a little bit about you.
Sure. So I'm retired Navy. I was a chief cryptologist. After I got medically retired, I went to work for the NSA as a civilian and ultimately for a while. Did a bunch of work there. I did some other work for some other government agencies. Then I went over to Forrester, where I met Steve. Was lucky enough to follow up with a lot of John Kindervog's work and do some Zero Trust publications there. And then since then, I've been a contractor flitting around and, doing what I can where I can to kind of spread the gospel of a security strategy that makes sense. And in the meantime, I managed to get a doctorate and write 7 or 8 books and 6 or 7 patents.
Oh my gosh. Well, you clearly kept busy. That's
I
understand.
The worst thing is for me not to have something to do. I get really irritated.
Yeah. So kind of starting off pretty basic, for you, when folks are pursuing, a zero trust journey, or pursuing, implementing ZT, what do you believe are the absolute foundational steps as people kind of navigate in that direction?
For me, the first thing that anybody should do is it's one of two things. And I think one is if you haven't got a really good inventory of what's currently on the network and what it's doing, then I would say that that's pretty dang important. The other one I would say is if you're a little bit more bold and you're willing to actually take this from a perspective of, real defense and real operational side, run a full-on red team, and then they'll tell you what's on your network and where it's configured and where it's misconfigured. And then you can go fix those problems. And that's the difference. I don't mean a pen test. A pen test is fine, but I mean a legit full-on red team and let it do its thing. And then you'll be in a way better position. When I work with orgs doing ZT, strategy consulting, if they're not willing to do a red team, I'm not willing to give them my time.
Wow. So, personally, that's the first time I've heard somebody talk about red teaming as a way to kind of accelerate, your understanding of your environment. Can you tell us maybe some of your experience with folks who have taken your advice on pursuing that path and, what that's kind of revealed to them, on where they should prioritize things?
Yeah, the one that's most interesting was working with a group that did OT, IoT stuff on pipelines in the Nordic region. And they ended up finding a system that was exposed to the internet that had admin as a password for about 7 years straight. And it connected on the backside to a few 100,000 miles of total pipeline access. So, that was one of those this is probably an issue we should fix right now. And the funny thing was, they had run scans and they had run inventories, they had whatever else. Day 1 or 7 of, letting the evildoers kind of pick around at things, they found it, sent it over. So, it's just a miracle that someone else hadn't used that for malicious purposes.
That's a pretty insane example.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious, Chase. When you're talking, you speak a lot. I personally have been lucky enough to witness a lot of your webinars and your podcasts. To try to join into that whenever I can. Lucky enough, that's right. I'm curious, what are the most kind of common misconceptions that you're continually fighting when you're talking to your industry counterparts as well as the people that you're consulting for?
The biggest one lately has been small businesses, because I've been trying to do most work with those folks, and they're the ones that have the most responsibility and the least budget now, is that they say, well, I'm not worth it for a bad guy to come after. Why would I buy? It's well, you have accesses to things, you have business relationships. If nothing else, you've got jump points that someone can use to launch attacks on other systems. So you're a valuable target. And I just think that that's the one that stands out most, is that that's the real issue. And then the other one is folks that still hem and haw on, oh, well, you can't call it zero trust because that hurts people's feelings or whatever. Boo boo doo. Like, fine, call it cyber tiddlywinks, call it cyber Taurus Rex. Like, I don't care what the name of it is. Just approach the problem with a strategy that actually makes sense. It irritates the hell out of me when someone's like, we can't tell our employees that we have zero trust for them. It's like, that's not what I'm saying, moron. Like, it's zero trust for the strategy. Trust your employees all you want, but don't give them implicit trust in systems and remove trust from inside of networks where we know that we have 30 years of evidence of this stuff. And folks still sit around like, I don't know if that's legit.
That's wow. So from the small business front, like kind of leading into that, because I know that you and a bunch of other folks were working with CISA and a bunch of the agencies to create these commoditized offerings, like for folks who maybe can't afford, some of the enterprisey solutions or anything out there to kind of make these things happen. And I remember specifically that you had done a blog post way back when on doing zero trust on a shoestring budget, basically. Can you tell us, like, maybe the failings, like, in the space around all of that? Because I know, again, having personally, like, working in the space, on the evil side of things, like, a lot of these solutions are built for those folks, and it's not straightforward to go, like, after you've laid out, everything that you were talking about before. When they have to go and actually implement things, it's not easy, and they don't make it easy, and it's expensive in a lot of cases. And you can prove, like with that blog post, that it doesn't have to be expensive or anything like that. But, I'll stop there. Like, what have you seen kind of in the space, like, from a failing standpoint and maybe successes on driving that narrative? I think it's great that you're kind of helping, a space that's been traditionally underserved.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I don't really care about enterprises, because enterprises are kind of like infinite spend and infinite money, and they're just, lumbering along doing their thing. Me personally, just my gut is I care about small business and everyday people and that type of thing. So I dedicate a lot of time to working with those folks. Like, I do a lot of pro bono stuff for people on ZT, and it's not that crazy difficult, especially for people when they actually back up from it and go, okay, well, what do I need to make it work for me? A lot of times they'll say, oh, well, we got to hit a SEM. It's like, why? Or do you have 100,000 endpoints to moderate and manage and figure out what the hell's going on there? Oh, no, we have 6 employees. Then what do you need a SEM for? Why would you even bother with that? Okay, well, we need HP all-in laptops for every person here. Is anyone here doing game design or hardcore development? No. Then give them Chromebooks. Like, there's just basic things that you do that make things more secure just from the very nature of the way they exist. And Google didn't cut me a check, but I'm just saying Chromebooks are a really useful thing in the context of ZT, because there's really not an operating system. The operating system's the web. Try and run ransomware on a Chromebook. Watch what happens. Nothing, because it doesn't work. So why would you not do those things? And then moving people into stuff like browser isolation or enterprise browser, whatever you want to call it, and abandoning and tossing those expensive, wasteful phishing programs that we train on into the trash. Like, the hill that I want to die on is the death of the phishing training industry. I want to be on top of that hill fighting like 100 robots coming at me with 1.9mm, because I'm going to go down spot. I despise the way that market's been built. I think it just does a disservice to people, and it's continued to get more growth, even though it's proven that it's not the solution that it's. Not that I have an opinion on it.
No, not at all.
Chase, one of the things we hear a lot is organizations feeling like they don't know where to start at all with zero trust. They're just kind of looking, and there's so much. There's 10 different frameworks or wherever. Where are you starting people out if they're just beginning their zero trust journey?
Well, I mean, one thing I remind them is, like, how long did it take you to build your business or build your infrastructure? And usually they'll say, oh, I've been at this for 25 years. Okay, well, then it's probably going to take us a little bit of time to get you to a stage that's more realistic as far as security controls. It's not going to happen in 25 hours. It's going to be maybe 25 weeks, something along those lines. So just grounding folks in that there's a reality, there is a maturity curve here, et cetera. I personally think that for most small businesses and the normal side of the equation, moving them off of what they don't need, get rid of, moving them away to centralized identity management control, having a really good asset inventory, and just having a good understanding of where the risks are, and then applying the controls there based on reality, not on Kentucky windage. The industry's best guess at threats. If it doesn't apply to you, then don't worry. You can't fix everything all the time. It's weird too, because you'll talk with people that are geniuses in finance, and it's like, do you change everything you do for your trading strategy when the Fed stubs their toe on the way to work? No, you keep sticking with it, right? Because the market will work itself out over time, because you have proof over history that these strategies work. Guess what? The same thing works in cyber. Shocker.
Kind of dialing in on that, because I love where Zach's going with this. Like, I talked to, well, I guess when I was looking for a job, being part of the great tech layoffs, last year, I found that there's a lot of organizations building purpose-built zero trust orgs. I would love to get your take on that, because I'm seeing job postings for zero trust architects, zero trust engineers, and I know you've got to have an opinion on that. As
Yeah, good time to be somebody with zero trust on your, resume. Like the whole Dr. Zero Trust thing was literally a joke. I was doing with some stuff with a couple friends of mine, and they was like, oh, you have a doctorate in computer science, you do so much ZT, you should have a doctorate in zero trust. And I was like, giggle. And I just went off and started running with it. It turned into a thing. So, I mean, that's the veracity and the validity of someone saying that there is zero trust X in the space. It's kind of shenanigans. But the truth of the matter is, there are good programs and good education and good certs and good books and lots of reference material to help people understand the strategic value of zero trust. Do I think you should be building a ZT org? I don't know. I would say that's dependent on every single organization. They're slightly different in the way that they do things, but the strategy is still valuable. I would argue that most organizations would be better off bringing in an outside consultant or an outside third party to guide their zero trust plans and programs, because you never want your baby to be called ugly by the mother or father, right? You're going to want to hear it from somebody else. And there's people out there that do know what they're doing and do have the experience that can come in and go, look, this is a waste of time. This is a bad effort. And if you're a small or mid-sized business, I've done the calls with people where I've punted a vendor because they didn't want to get rid of them. They had a working relationship or something like that. I'm like, well, their tech is trash. Do you want me to do it? Bringing in a third party can help with that.
Diving a little bit into the vendor front, since we got there in conversation naturally, we're still seeing, vendors out there that are claiming zero trust certified products. They're claiming that there's a silver bullet product they can implement. You still seeing that? I'm sure with your consulting efforts.
Yeah, there's one that rhymes with B failer. Yeah, that does a lot. Their CEO is always on MSNBC running his mouth about stuff like that, and he knows about as much of it as I do about underwater basket weaving. So yeah, there's plenty of folks that are skewing the market there. I mean, and there's a market created, so there's blood in the water, right? The sharks are going to go where the blood is, which fine. That means we get investment, we get innovation, we get growth, which is good. That'll help people. But these anyone that says they have a zero trust certified product, yeet them into the sun, because there is no zero trust certified product. I just saw the thing that came out recently from CISA, about the cyber trademark or whatever it is.
I was just going to ask you, but
that thing, I was like that. I'm glad that my tax dollars went down the hole of hell for that, because it's pointless. It's the same thing if I see a zero trust certified product. Zero trust certifications for people that have gone through the education and training and strategy and research and all those things. Sure. Great. I mean, I have one, but I wrote most of it, so whatever. So it's, the products though. I mean, ZT certified products from what governing body?
I would love kind of going down that hole, right? There's two questions that I had for you. Was one, I see a lot of vendors still doing this because, like you said, I don't know if we've reached the top of hype around ZT quite yet, but you see a lot of vendors introducing all the buzzword bingo and acronyms about slamming ZT right in front of their product name and creating a new product space to fit into the domains around that. Wanted to get your take on that. And then following up with that, I've seen a lot of the material or a lot of stuff that you've been speaking about as of recent is talking about how microsegmentation isn't as hard as people think it is. And I would love to hear your take on that because I know certainly I've been guilty of preaching that that's like a really tough project in itself. And, it sounds like you've done some recent research or some recent projects that have kind of proven the other way.
Yeah. So, I mean, look at where the AI hype is right now. By the way, that's AI. So quit saying that. I tell people every time you say something to AI, it puppy dies. And I mean, maybe they'll stop saying it, but it's not AI. It's machine learning. It's large language modeling. It's compute and process and mathematics and algorithms and whatever. And it vomits back a response based on what you input it. So it's not AI. AI is a whole different thing. However, the market and the majority of people go, ooh, AI, I saw that on TV one time. That must be what it is because Salesforce told me that it is. So now they stick an AI button in front of it and people buy more of that thing. DeepSeek, right? AI, even though it's a Chinese piece of malware. I mean, that's, folks just jump into it. So the same thing with ZT. They'll throw whatever they can in there to try and sell it. And again, from the selfish market dynamics of I see a value to a strategy that is called zero trust. If people want to dump money in this space and it winds up helping the market get better overall, like I'll personally live with the delusion of the reality, but it is not helpful for folks that think that they can just get it and turn it on. Their, ZT, that's how I feel about that one too. And I mean, look at, the moment you get like Matthew McConaughey and Keanu Reeves pitching your products, pretty much BS, if you ask me.
I don't know. I thought that the people as lamps was the ideal way to really get a product out there.
No comment. And the other side of it too on micro segmentation 5 years ago, super difficult, very hard to do at the bottom layer. Now, because of ZTNA, because of policy engines, because of the abstraction capabilities that we can put kind of a layer above the hardcore network side, there's like this, and I don't know that it's been defined by OSI or anybody, but if you look at the market, there really is kind of this technology innovation that's happening in the OSI stack between the network layer and some of the other pieces. And that's really becoming a functional capability. That's where microsegmentation comes in. And I think to your point, Steve, like it's micro because you go down as far as you can feel comfortable with the level of control and restriction you're putting on a system. It's not micro if you're just going to go in there and say, I'm going to segment the ever living hell out of everything on my network and hope that it works out because something's going to go wrong. And the first thing that happens when something goes wrong in security is that control goes away.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I think with the micro segmentation mania and everything else that we're seeing, it boils back down to that aim small, miss small kind of principle of you got to start somewhere, approach it the right way and in a way that makes sense for your business.
Well, my big counter to the original model, and John Kinderbach and I go around and around this. I love him like a brother. I respect him so much, but I think the thing that he and I differ on is his original impetus was data first and secure data, and then work your way outwards. For me, if you think about the modern business, define data for me. Like data is so different and ethereal and whatever else. If us three work together, and Zach, you come up with a blog, and Steve, you come up with a video, and I come up with a piece of code. Did we just create three different pieces of valuable data, or is it intellectual property? Oh, and then you change it. Well, where did it go and where does it live? And then we transition it back and forth in Slack and put it in G Drive. So defining where data is and being able to localize, encrypt, and basically secure it, I think is a fool's errand for most organizations to begin with. So for me, the model of ZT flips more towards the operational side of combating the adversary where I know they're coming and that I can actually gain ground provably. Like I could spend 5 years doing data security and never be able to prove I actually made much difference. And that's never a conversation you want to have with leadership when they say, well, cool, show us the return on investment. You go, there's not.
That's, yeah, I love the call out around that. So kind of like dovetailing from there, I love that you're talking about kind of the things that bring and buzzword bingo, like the return on investment, right? Like if people don't see that as they're pursuing these types of things, there's controls that go away, there's budgets that go away. in your opinion, like where have you seen organizations get the most bang for their buck around all of this? I know you talked about identity centralization. I know that's a very common area. Maybe there's some uncommon areas that you've seen where folks have pursued leveling up a particular domain or a particular, area. Like where have you seen, those wins, like from an ROI perspective, so that they can keep marching towards ZT?
Yes. So usually what it turns out is when you put a real good strategy and a plan in place and base it on the reality of the threat that you're facing, you'll find stuff that doesn't work and isn't necessary, and you can get rid of it. And to give you an idea, like I've done stuff with a cruise line, and they had, I want to say it was like 7 CISOs in 9 years, and they had something like 55, 58 security solutions in their suite. How many of those are redundant because there's not that many problems to solve? We went through the rigmarole and strategizing, et cetera, and then got to it, and they wound up going from nearly 60 down to like 11 or 12. And they freed up all that budget from all those other solutions that were just sitting there. And the network cleared up because traffic wasn't being sent everywhere all the time for no really good reason. So, if you look at it there, you could say, well, my return on investment is I freed up X number of dollars tech that wasn't really doing anything for me. I also freed up bandwidth, because for a cruise line, bandwidth is a really big deal because they're not tied to shore. They don't drag an Ethernet cable with them out to sea. Like we're over satellite. So they were able to say we're optimizing the bandwidth piece. And then there's, the follow-on side of your employees, which is an ROI that's really hard to figure out, will actually be better off and more, I won't say happy, but more accepting of the controls you're putting in front of them because they're not encumbered by it. If anybody's ever had to use like the Cisco AnyConnect system, you want to, poke your eyes out with a poker rather than actually turn the damn thing on. So if you can get away from those systems, life gets better for you.
And kind of like pulling on that thread, and then I want to pass it over to Zach. Platform versus best in breed. And I know that this is like some of the previous research that you were doing at Forrester, especially with the ZTX framework and all of that. With the way it sits today, like what makes sense? What doesn't make sense? Like what are you like, God damn it, like I don't want you like going down this.
Majority of folks should look at portfolio, not platform. And what I mean by portfolio is integrated solutions with APIs that interoperate from a variety of vendors that have best of breed capabilities that meet your needs. And if they can't do that and they're not able to play nice together in the same sandbox, find another vendor, because APIs are a beautiful thing. So most organizations, especially small and mid-sized businesses, would do well to move towards cloud providers, portfolio type of offerings, integrated solutions, API enablement. The platform is going to be very limited for the mega enterprises that can get full value out of spending the majority of their budget with the big players in the space. And that's just kind of my position on it. And I think that makes, from my experience, that makes the most logical sense for people on the budget as well as the usage side of things.
And is that a reality today? Because I know that if you're talking about some of the bigger cloud players, they don't play nice with the rest of the ecosystem.
Some of them don't play nice with each other as far as the cloud side of it goes, but most of them play nice with the vendors that provide security solutions inside of the tenant. So, if you go to AWS, there's a whole marketplace for security solutions. If you go to Azure, there's a whole marketplace for security solutions. Live there, use their stuff, operationalize those capabilities, and then get rid of other crap you don't need. But you're going to wind up with a, patchwork quilt Rubik's Cube type thing. And that's fine. The odds of most organizations being able to say, we are all Palo Alto, super slim.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about frameworks with you. There's a lot out there. You can use like reference architecture with 802.7. You've got the extended ecosystem, ZTMM plus new one from Frontline. Where are you kind of seeing these be successful, or gaps in this kind of existing framework out there that helps inform security leaders?
Well, Jason Garbus, the stuff he's done with the ZTMM is great. That guy really knows what he's doing. So I would say if he's writing stuff, both folks should look at it. The O'Reilly book on Zero Trust is awesome. Anything, Kindervog puts out is definitely something I would align on as far as the strategy and concept side. So I think that really what folks should do is look at a variety of those things and pull them together and figure out how that works for you. I'm always very hesitant to say, use the ZTX extended ecosystem, because when I put that together, I never said this is going to be the thing for everybody. My goal was to say, here's a Rosetta Stone that you can use to translate and get some clarity and figure out what it works for your organization. So my concept, my advice to people is look at all those things, figure out what it looks like for you. And the good thing about strategy and reference material, there's a reason the word reference is in it. You can refer to it and then use it for your purposes, not in Dominis Patria Filisanti, thou shalt only do what this says.
Yeah. I love that advice. It's something that we've preached a number of times on this, is you've got to find what works for you, and it's reference, it's all reference.
With your doctor, like you should be anyway. Anyone that goes to their doctor and their doctor just says, take this, and you go, okay, like you should take a second and go, well, wait, can you tell me what that drug does? You don't just, take it for effect. Like, I mean, in your normal life, I think that we get lost in this space a lot too. I know I'm ranting here just a bit, but like, if you really think about it, you live in a world where hopefully intelligent decisions and strategy surround everything that you do. It may not be the level of, an enterprise architect security program, but, think about stuff, get it from different sources, make your own decisions, make it work for you. Figure out how these things are going to be beneficial or not, and optimize yourself, your resources around the reality. Like, you do it when you exist on this earth, do it in cyber.
You've said a couple of phrases that I really keyed in on some of your conversations that I wanted to bring up here for our audience. How can security leaders avoid distractions like Hollywood stuff and compliance shenanigans? I know you're passionate about that kind of stuff when they're implementing a zero trust strategy.
I mean, compliance is the bar. It's not the ceiling. Strive, it makes me want to pull the little bit of hair I have left out when folks are like, we're going to get to 800 or we're going to get to, 1,200 or 27,000 or whatever else, NIST, whatever, blah. Like, wait, you should achieve compliance because your program is so good that compliance happens, not that you hit the bar and you stopped and you said, oh, thank God I've hit the bar. Like, that's not necessary. It's not how you should work. It's problematic. And the Hollywood side of things, there's no dinosaurs. I hate to inform everybody, like they're not alive. So even though there's movies about dinosaurs, you're not going to see a brontosaurus walk down the street. It's the same in cyber. So even though we can do cool things in cyber at Hollywood, the reality of the way that works in on normal systems is very, very, very different. There's a new movie coming out with Robert De Niro, I think, is the guy, which, okay. But he's like, I think it's called Zero Day or something. I'm waiting to see them. Yeah. Because usually these movies are hilarious. Like the last one with Black Cat, where the bad guy's code was in red and everybody else's was green. It's like, okay, that's how that happens. Cool.
Steve, over to you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, now I have to ask you what your favorite hacker type movie is.
Sneakers.
Well, I should have expected that. So I want to go back to the beginning around something that you mentioned around red teaming, to kind of get that kind of quick assessment of your environment. I'd love to know if you've done any research or kind of seen anything from applying the attacker mindset to scoping out the way that, your strategy around implementing zero trust or just implementing cybersecurity in general. And if you could share with our audience anything around that.
Oh, let me give you I always talk about reality. Let me give you a really good example of what the value of red team can provide. So I've always been big into combat sports, right? So I've been working in Krav and a bunch of other stuff, whatever. There's always those people that I call them dojo black belts, where they got their black belt in the dojo, but they've never been in an actual fight, right? They're like badass when they're on the mat and they've got their gi on and their whatever else. I knew a dude that was like 4th level Dan. I think it was in one of the forms, whatever else. So he was like Steven Seagal plus Bruce Lee when he was on them. Fast forward, he went out to a bar and ran his mouth at the wrong Redden and got his ass whipped. And the reason he got his ass whipped was the dude picked up a chair and hit him with it when he wasn't looking. And it was like, that's what happens in the real world, bro. Like, your belt didn't help stop that thing from caving your skull in. So that's what people should think about when I'm thinking about red teaming is the bad guys don't play by the rules. They don't care how good you are inside of your compliance dojo. They don't care how many little white things you have on your black belt. When it comes down to it, if you're in a street fight and somebody's, running their mouth, they might pick up a brick and throw it at you. So be ready for it. That's the difference between reality and being prepared in a space where everything is controlled. That's not the wild, wild west of the end.
How do you land that message with like organizations when you talk to them? Because I know, again, being on the evil side of things, even just like level setting when I talk to people, they just don't, I feel like the message doesn't land. Like they're just like, well, we've always done it this way. We've always bought solutions this way. It's like, I still reference the NotPetya attacks, and they did that too. And look at how that panned out for them. I feel like, to your point, everybody's memory is very short, around these types of things. I know that I'm certainly guilty of it, but how do you land that message? When you talk to folks, do you bring up a variety of different attacks that have happened in the past? Do you bring up your experience, in the military?
I make that with them. If they're willing to do red team stuff, I'm all right, cool. So here's the parameters. Here's what we're doing. If we don't do anything and don't find anything or whatever else, a quarter of the value of whatever contract we have is up for grabs. I'll give you that ROI.
Wow.
They're like, oh, cool. So you'll refund us whatever if you don't find anything on our compliant network. Mm-hmm. I'm glad to give it back to you. I don't want anything else. I don't want any bonuses or whatever else. But if you're gonna run it, put your money where your mouth is, and let's see what's up, and then we'll get back to you. And so far, Chase has never had to pay back.
I love that. I love that approach.
I think that's great. Zach, I want to pass it back to you.
Yeah, so we are kind of approaching the end of our conversation. So I wanted to ground this. How do you define zero trust people?
Don't trust nothing. That's
you would think it's simple, but we have a lot of conversations and it seems like nobody can agree on that.
And if you want to get slightly more academic and nerdy with it, zero trust is about removing default trust from inside of enterprise infrastructure and networks. There you go. That's what it is. So if you want to say find the bar, if you can remove all the default trust, you're moving towards zero trust. And if you think about what default trust looks like, it's stupid passwords, it's easy access, it's no segmentation, it's bad usernames, it's all the things that we know about that are written into best practices. And oh, by the way, are part of compliance checklists that people still sit around and go, well, gosh, I don't understand what zero trust is. No, you just didn't call it that. You can look at 27001, you can look at FIPS, you can look at those things and read through it. It sure says the stuff that we talk about in ZT, but for some reason you say zero trust, people get all cross-eyed now. So.
Yeah, one other question I wanted to ask you, like Zach was saying, I know we're coming up on time here. If there was material you could recommend to somebody, if there was somewhere that you could point them to really level set, where they're at, or kind of educate themselves appropriately, on pursuing this path, where would you point them?
Anything that Jason Garbus puts out, I think you should look at. He's got a great newsletter. Anything Kindervog has put out, I think folks should look at. Forrester does a ton of really good work in zero trust. Gardner publishes SASE, which is the dumbest thing I think anyone's ever come up with in the history of DOM, so don't waste your time with that. Who wants to say they're sassy? That sounds like a honey boo boo strategy. And then, the O'Reilly book on zero trust is very good. The Cloud Security Alliance has got a lot of really good reference material on ZT. There's tons and tons of it. So, like I said earlier, I think that there's some folks that genuinely have put the time in and the research and can provide value and insight. Then there's some posers. I'm probably somewhere between the two because, I'm not on the keyboard anymore. I guess I'm a glorified poser now. But the reality of it is there's people that know what they're doing and there's real value here. And there's tons and tons of research material. So put it together for yourselves. And if you have to, if you're real lazy, use ChatGPT and ask it.
Well, thanks, Chase. It's been really helpful for me learning from your experience here today. I hope it's been helpful for our audience. I'm sure it has. If you were to give our audience one takeaway from this discussion, what would it be?
Realize that you are valuable in the context of cyber warfare for an adversary. That is it. You, your family, your kids, your IoT-enabled toilet, all that stuff is valuable for an adversary in the context of cyber warfare. We're in a space that only 2 times in history has the entire world categorically changed. One was the invention of gunpowder, The other was the invention of the internet. And that's where we're at right now.
I love that. I think that's a great takeaway. Dave, you want to close this out?
Absolutely. Dr. Zero Trust, Chase Cunningham, thank you so much for agreeing to come on our show. Thank you for your unfiltered opinions as always, and the valuable advice that you've given everybody. And thank you to our viewers for tuning in to the Zero Trust journey. Chase, if our viewers want to connect with you, where are the best places for them to connect with you?
But yeah, look me up on LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. I do some work with the good folks at G2, and then I'm always out there, gibbering on stage somewhere. So feel free to come up and say hi.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much again, Chase, for coming on the show, and thank you to our viewers for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode.